that year, this year HaCHODESH, which is 60 years, Nicen, there were two Maamorim, which I very much like to learn before Nicen. So we'll try and make progress. Let's begin. So this is Shabbos Pashas Shmiני, Pashas HACHODESH ניסן. HaCHODESH like this year, right? This year Shabbos, this Shabbos is Shabbos Mevarchim, correct? No?
Yes.
It's the same curious. ויאמר Rabbi על Moishe בלעם בארץ מצרים לאמר, so the Abishah told Moishe in Eretz Mitzrayim to give over to Yidden that HaChodesh HAZEH LOCHEM Rish Chodeshim Rishon LOCHEM LOCHEM Rish Chodesh ניסן. It's actually two mitzvahs here. The general mitzvah is the mitzvah of the Jewish calendar, number one, and that this month, Chodesh ניסן, should be the first of the months of the year. So this mitzvah, which Rashi brings, should dibur chomel. Rashi explains why he had to go out of the city. Rashi explains why he had to go out of the city. That if Bachlal for all of the tzivuyim, the Abishah didn't tell him in the presence of Paroi, how much more so. Dibur Chomor, Rashi says, Chomor meaning to say a serious commandment, this mitzvah, the first mitzvah of the Torah, how much more so he had to, Sminej, he had to go out of the city, which is full of idolatry. So the point being that it's a Dibur Chomor, we understand, Dibur Chomor is the first mitzvah of all Torah mitzvahs. And K'mavur said this, as this mind will explain also, it's not just the first, but it's a new kloli, which is why it's the first. So, what's the question? It was still the Mitzrayim. It was out of the city, but still in Mitzrayim. So the fact that this mitzvah should be said in Mitzrayim is two opposite things. How so? The fact that he told him where that just Mitzrayim, what does that mean? So in addition to the fact that Yidden are still in Golos Mitzrayim, but it could have been that the Dibur was not in, it could be a time of Golos, a man of Golos, but not in the place of Golos. For example, when Moishe spoke to the Moishe from the burning bush, this man was Golos, but he didn't speak to him in Mitzrayim. On the HaRalikim, which turns out, which is in Sinai. So it's not just this man Golos, where was it in Eretz Mitzrayim? No, it's Mazman the Golos Mitzrayim. So in addition to the fact that in this man of Golos, now he's asking the question: Golos Mitzrayim, Golos the shibud that was over the Chor. He said it wasn't. That even though before this dibur barish chodesh ניסן kvar botlo ha'avoda, in terms of actual work, that was botlo. Already Rosh Hashanah, the Yidden were no longer working in slave bepayel to the Mitzrayim. However, it's not Golos anymore. So the answer is it still is. It's only with respect to what to Bitla Havoida. But the Shibud Mitzrayim still continued till they left Mamash. And we see this in the, and we say this in that Goda, that The Mishnah Psachim brings number 5. Look at the sikhs. That the shibud was still, they left. They were still not what shibud means. They were still beholden. Behold, the shibud is bound up with the Mitzrayim. They weren't working, but they were still the etzem avodim. Yeah, we say in the bracha, but Laila Zeh, we went the end of the whole Haggadah. We say in this night he went from where? Mishibud the Geula. We're talking about the night of the Seder, even though the actual Avdus was bottled already from Rosh Hashanah, 6 months earlier. All to bring out that where is this Dibur Chomor, this weighty commandment, literally, Chomor, Chomer, Lashon Chomer. Where is it taking place? In Zman of Golus, a place of Golus, and Zman of Golus. Furthermore, Befratit Mashas Beliel, especially in connection with it, we explained earlier in the Maimer of the Purim Maimer. Yeah, Chalana Noshim, B'diak Aloshin HaKosu. Explained in the Maimer that the diak of Eles can be only Mitzrayim. That was the whole diak there. What was going from Anias, from Enoni Elabadas to Eretz Tevor Chava. So explain the Shagula Aliyah Atzmai Oisabef and Oni Mitzrayim. So where are they coming from? From the place of not Stam Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim means Agbola. This is only Mitzrayim. It's still in till they left, they were in Oni Mitzrayim, in the poverty, the Ruchni is the poverty of Mitzrayim. And that was in the Geula, they're going out of only Mitzrayim. And as we note in the Maimer, that continues, that Anias continues, which is why Amalek attacks, still the Dargi of Eretz Zavas Chalav Dvash. It's still the Anias in Mitzrayim. That was the whole point of the Maimer. And the whole Seder, the whole Avodah that's required till you get to Eretz Zavas Chalav Dvash, which is Gadus HaMoiche and Chachma Binin, as explained. So Lachas Kam V'Kam L'Keid Ma'Gula V'Rish Chodesh Nisan. So the only Mitzrayim continues even after they left, much more so before the actual Gula itself in Mitzrayim, Rish Chodesh Nisan, Ari Bevadi Ma'im the Matzav the Golas Mitzrayim. There was certainly in a Matzav of Golas. So that's what. That's a description of where they are, where the Dibur is being, where the Dibur is being said. Now, what about the Dibur? The two Yanim Hofkin here. Neither Gisen Bisman the Golas Mitzrayim, that is Mitzrayim Gufa, and on the other hand, in Zman of Golus and in the place of Golus, like a Dibur, the HaChodesh HaZelachem. What was the Dibur HaChodesh HaZelachem? Shehu Loirat Lamar Lemeretz Mitzrayim. Not only is this Dibur convey a Gilui which is high in Eretz Mitzrayim, but Gam Lamar Lemeklolosin Hazman Amokev, never mind Mitzrayim, which is a constraint, but higher than the whole Geder of Zman Amokev, of time and place. In brackets, the Mayim Mercedes Talshus, it means beyond the whole system of divinity of the course. Where do we see that the Inyan of HaChodesh HaZelachem is higher than Seder Talshus? Can move from the Mayim Razal Pasuk HaChodesh HaZelachem. It's understood in Medrash on the Pasuk HaChodesh HaZelachem. The Medrash says as follows: when the Eibush chose his world, which is before he created it, he chose to create it. It was also referring to the Olam he created before. That he created the world, worlds and destroyed them, and then finally chose this one. So he chose to establish in it this whole notion of Chodesh and years and months and years. That was when he chose creation, this world. He wants Elam HAZEH. And when he chose the Yidden, he's really in the Rambam said that did it. But what's the premise of the Dir? The premise of the Dir is Yidden. So he chose Yaakov Ubonov, in this man, in this Seder Azman, which he established as part and parcel of creation, he chose Chodesh ניסן to be the first, the Chodesh of Geula. So what did the choice of making Chodesh ניסן the Chodesh of Geula? It's a change in the whole gather of Zman. Till then it was just nature. Now this month becomes Geula. Since there's a new choice here, the choice in Eden is bound up with the choice of Chodesh ניסן, Chodesh HaGeula. So therefore, this means a change in place as well, not just time. In brackets, there's no time and space are bound up with the other. Time is the distance between 2 points. So what's the shaila? The shaila is, here we're talking about where is the dibur in Golos, Zman of Golos, and Mokim of Golos. And what's the dibur? Hayden Ishtalshus. So how was it that such a lofty revelation, communication should be? That's the first question. Why was it said to both Moishe and Aaron? Usually the was to Moishe, Moishe would tell Aaron, Aaron would tell the Yidden, which because of the Dibur Hu L'Cholam, he, referring to Aaron, will speak to you to the people.
Lechalam.
No, I don't think so. I will ask about Kaiser. Oh, he's appointing him. He will speak for your behalf.
Okay, you're right.
The people. This is by the Moshe's protesting the Sheminis with the whole role. So that was to the people. I've appointed you to be a lord of a party. And Aaron will be, Novi means the articulator. Rashi explains, he'll explain Yam Litzena, he will elaborate, explain your words to party. So that's the question. But that Akal is to Moishe alone. And here, and Aaron's job was just to then convey it. But here, this dibur is to Moishe now. You've behektim, yeah. So those are the two shilas. Number one, why such a lofty dibur is in Zman HaGolos, in Mokim HaGolos, in Oni Mitzrayim, and why is it to Aaron also? Beis. So chapter 2, yeah? Very Beis. Always Beis. Just occurred to me now that they're not called prakim, they're called oisius in the language of Chassidus, and perhaps because ois is Maloshan Asa Boiker, revelation. Morning has come. Okay. But you've met in being under Shemish Rabbeinu, so you first to understand in your under Shemish Rabbeinu. Shnikra Al-Shem, why was he called Moishe? She drew him from the water. Which means, when Neshama Datzilos, he was a Neshama Datzilos, Mayim, being, Dinyan of Atzilus. Alma Discassia, hidden world, where all the creatures there are submerged in their source, inseparable from the source. Now, in detail, looks like there's a whole arichas here, not the whole Mayim, but in Dinyan of Atzilus, Dinyan of Moishe. Bira in that Atzilus Yuvan, being that in Atzilus to understand Atzilus Yuvan, Mashakos and Moshe Rabbeinu, understand this from that which is written about Moshe. Shoivam the regular same Atzilus that he was the level of Atzilus that it says. Abisha told him. This is the story of giving the meat. You know, a craving for meat. So as for the Shiv Ish Mizikni, so gather for me the Abisha system Moshe. 7 of the elders of Eden, and I will separate from the spirit that is upon you, and I'll place it upon them. So that's Loshen Atzilus. So let's examine that that term and what happened here. The Piddish Vatzalti who afroshes ha'ora miruchish shel Moishe al askenim. Vatzalti, I will separate, says God, means I will separate a light, a reflection, a glimmer of the Ruach of Moishe and give it to the elders. Through which then the Eden will then be able to receive via from you, but with the agency of the Skenim, meat. Mana direct from Moishe. Moishe himself is beyond physical hashpah. What does Moishe give? Moishe gives them man, he nourishes them. But they were grumbling, they were dissatisfied. But what's the meaning of man shleiba pseilis? Man was pure, they had no waste. Why Liasim wasn't ruchni? Because it's primarily wasn't ruchni, the goods of the Zayim, the chuchmisa. It's a mozen that's bound up with chachma, meaning atzilus. But LOCHEM on ma'ayin the boss of it, Moishe protested and said, "From where will I get from them meat?" He could not lower himself, that through him should be meat, ashpah of meat. So on the one hand, since all ashpahs, including the physical, to all members of the generation, but especially that lofty generation, the dirt of knowledge, which was Moshe Rabbeinu's generation. So it has to come through Moshe ultimately. Therefore, they didn't bypass Moshe and say, okay, the Skenim will give. But it had to be, he was to told him, you gather the 70, from your spirit, I will convey it, give it to them. Through the intermediary, the means, through the agency of the Skenim, but through them receiving the light of Moishe, so the Ashbah will come also from Moishe ultimately, but through them. What do we see from here? First touch in the word Atzilus. Actually, we see two types in here. We see two things. In this Vatzalti, I will separate from you, that Hashem says to Moshe. Number one, Aleph, it's not Moshe himself. We just said it was he could not directly give the boss of this Ashpah. It's merely a glimmer. And it's the Moshe that Rashi brings from Medrash, describing this moment. It's a everybody takes light, but the light, the flame itself doesn't become diminished at all. There's no difference between Oir and Shefa. Literally, Oir light and Shefa influence in literal translation. The difference is when a person gives ashpah this way, he's giving of himself, and therefore he is weakened as a result. He lacks. Something lacks in the place from where the ashpah came, because actually giving something. So partly the ashpah, you're giving food, you have the food, now you're giving it away. So you're lacking that. The flow of water will cover you. Pasuk in the year, yeah. The water was here, and that's going here. That's Ashpah. Hashem been there by the flame of light. The light he is, and he illuminates. He doesn't become less because his presence illuminates. Right? That's the difference between Hashpah being as an example. There's two ways that we have to influence our environment. There's Oir and Hashpah. One is with your children. One is just being an example. The other is Hashpah. You've got to get down into the world. It costs you time and gesund, etc. You get into the world and give of yourself on many levels. And each one has a mila in terms of how it inspires. But oir means just your presence inspires. And then like the flame. The flame is not diminished by the fact that other flames are grown from it. Because it's not giving of its substance, but only a ha'or. That's one thing. So that's that's the downside. But the second thing we see in the story here with Moishe and the Skenim is, on the other hand, it's not giving and gone, no longer connected to the source. But a way of dvekus, it is a ha'orah from Moishe Rabbeinu. It wasn't now they're empowered, they must be. No, that's still coming from Moishe Rabbeinu. Two things are, it's merely a ha'orah, but it's dovuk. It's merely a glimmer. It's merely a glimmer. On the other hand, remains completely bound up with the source, with Moishe Rabbeinu. And that's Atzilus. Atzilus has these two contrasting properties, which the Line will explain. But first he lays it out what they are. It's me, the mir is glimmer from the Ein Sof, the Maitzel, the emanator. So again, Moshe Rabbeinu is no shaykhus to the whole union of Bos. It's a hashpola, it's a great descent. That's the ha'or, it's the merest reflection. It's not his world. So, Maskana, in Aleph, Atzilus is not the world of the Ein Sof. It's a different world completely. Moshe can't even relate to it. Yeah, I can't give you boss. My only boss. That's on the one hand. But it's still all him, not separate. So there's two taichen in the word Atzilus, reflective of these two contrasting properties. Lahatzil, as in the pasuk, v'atzalti, I will separate. But Eitzel means near and close. Actually, this is not in tradition mikra, this is already a Chassidus Kabbalah points out, the second taich. But it's clear from the story that it has to come still from Moishe. Why not just the Skenim will do it? This Atzilus, notwithstanding its Hakbola and its descent Hashbola from Ein Sof, it's still bound up with the market of Atzilus actually carries through the Maitzel, the Ein Sof, the infinite. So is it infinite or finite? What is it? That's the question here. That's what we have to understand. It's a order from Ein Sof Maitzel. So is it separate or is it bound up? Dovuk. The answer is both. Because the shadow is, how can it be both? That we have to understand. Yeah, is Gimel. Yes, yeah, we're good to go. In the Ein Sof, it's an Atzmi, the Maila Megillah, Ein Sof itself is higher than Gilui. What does it mean higher than Gilui? Doesn't Ein mean Gilui? It means higher than Gilui to creation, to anything other outside of the course. She saw some vanilla Magambri, it's closed and hidden completely. Yad, so much so I feel it's a keser. Even keser, which is the highest darga v'shtalshalos, as follows Yasviris. Nemar Yoshes Choshech Sislei. He places his secrecy in darkness. Shingen Helem Shlemaile Migiloi. So even he's saying even the darga of Keser, which is higher than Atzilus, is also higher than Gilui. Keser goes on the darga Yoshes Cheshes Sisra. So where does Gilui begin? Meaning Gilui Belam Atzilus. Gilui is Belam Atzilus. Maschon is Fires HaChochem, beginning with Chochem. What does Gilui mean? Again, Gilui means that something other should know that there's an Eibishter. Where does that start? That something other could know. That there could be otherness. And that this otherness should know that there's a God. That starts in Chochem Atzilus. And it's through the Gilui of Atzilus that this begins the whole phenomena, the whole metzius of godliness being known in the world, meaning our world. Atzilus is that bridge. Already we're starting to see here. Atzilus is the bridge that there is. That's what it's called Olam Atzilus. It's part of the Olamus. It's Atzilus, Eitzel, or as we just learned now, Hatzola, Eitzel, separation, close. Atzilus is the bridge of otherness, but an otherness that knows the truth. Again, and it's known that the whole chidush, it's a big chidush, that Nivroim creations, which are locked into their reality of creation, should know that there's an Eibishter as is possible, should know that they are not. We know, we say Loisius, should know, have the idea that the truth is we're not a Metzius. The only truth is the Eibishter. So how is this possible that a Nivra, whose whole gather is Metzius himself, should know of higher than Metzius? How is that possible? That's Atzilus. They're close in Asogas of Likus B'Nivroim, who mitzad zeh, that Nivroim should know of a Likus, mitzad zeh sheyesh lei Gilui d'Olam Atzilus. What conveys this tremendous revolution, this otherness, but the otherness should know that there's no other than him? That's an Olam Atzilus. Without this bridge, it's in the Memutza. Without the bridge of Atzilus, where there is creation, but it's bottled, there is otherness, it's not otherness, which the mind will explore further. There could not be in hardcore creation, Ivroyim, Yesh Ma'ayin, Betzias Gashmi, that we should have a knowledge of the truth that is completely not only not in our world, that truth means that our world has no truth intrinsically. That is conveyed by Olam Atzilus. This first bridge, this first Memutza between Elikus and creation. Moreover, kind of he's saying what I just said. Through Atzilus, we know not only do it, Atzilus conveys its own truth. We know of Eid Sof, we know the emes. That's all conveyed by Atzilus because it is this Memutza. It's Eitzel and it's separate at the same time. That's what we mean, that Atzilus reveals Eid Sof, which in and of itself is totally beyond our world, can't be revealed to us. In more simple language, it is purely infinite, and finite reality has no relationship with infinite. Could not even speak of it. But we do, and we can. That's because Atzilus is conveyed, Atzilus is that fusion of infinite and finite, that memutza. Therefore, that bridges this impossible gap and allows creation to know of Elikus. This is the upshot of all this. The Gilui that we know of Eid Sof is mitzad the dveikus of Atzilus, the etzloi component. That's Elikus. Calls and Atzilus of B'chinas Dvekas Berin Sof Etzle V'Somach. That's the Taich Etzle. That Atzilus is Dovuk, nothing, not something other. Shulachenu B'chinas Gilui, therefore can reveal Erin Sof. Umagale Gam B'chinas Elam Berin Sof, and reveals even the fundamental removedness, concealment of it. It's exclusive truth. It's exclusive truth. There's no Ein Mulvadoi. This Atzilus reveals. And the other property of Atzilus, Shegam Zendikra, Shegam Zendikra Afrosh, and furthermore, Shegam Zendikra Afrosh Aora, it's also Atzilus V'Lashon Lahat, to separate. Shulkamation Vishvanivdol, implying separation, Shomipnei, Sham Shochas Eir Atzilus Ardei Atzimtzum. That Atzilus itself comes as a result of the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum Arishan is what produces Atzilus. But Hinigam Hafroshes Ha'orda, he both shall dvekus. Even though it's a Ha'orda and it's Hafrosha, it's a Tzimtzum Arishan, this radical Tzimtzum, not simply a toning down, a screening, a dimming of the light, but this radical tzimtzum. But nonetheless, despite this is the big chiddush, despite the radical tzimtzum, there is dovuk. Moishe, like it is, the whole Yuvan starts in the next. The whole understanding starts in the next place. Moishe Ramshachas Hakav, like the kav that starts all of Ishtarshalus, and Atzilus is the first olam in the kav. But the kav itself, even on the one hand, the kav emerges after the radical tzimtzum, where quote unquote silik eire hagadol latzad, he removes his great light to the side, leaving a mokem pony. This is the lashon of the HACHODESH, leaving an empty space, which would imply that there's no longer dvekus. No, the kav then is drawn from the eire itself through the tzimtzum. The kamokim ari negate is the lashon here. Negate the dovak bird itself. The kav, that projection of God's presence in the mokim cholol, the place of utter concealment, begins with the attachments, dovuk, in the earth itself. Even though it's only connected by the tzimtzum, it's not like the pure earth and its dvekus in the etzim and the mo'ed, not the same. Nonetheless, it is dovuk. So far, it's all oisius. Hopefully, we're getting the language, the template. The Yuvan's in the next ois, there's a very fundamental naimer in understanding ishtalshalus, which means understanding reality. And how is it that we know that there's a God, and what does that mean? The friends. Yep.